So we're on page Yud. Everyone, please mute yourself. We're on page Yud. We're going to finish chapter 5 in Tanya. And to recap what we learned yesterday, the Alter Rebbe in the beginning of this chapter of Perek Hey, he seeks to understand the terminology used by Eliyahu in the Zohar HaKadosh, Les machshava tfisa bei klal. No thought can grasp you at all. Kiyim kasher tfisa b'teiro mitzvahs. Rather, only when you grab on to teiro mitzvahs. And the language there of tfisa is very, very strange and unusual, because what he means is, what the Zohar HaKadosh means, what Eliyahu Dalfin means is, no one can understand God unless you understand his teiro mitzvahs. Simple. But the language, the Alter Rebbe says, is not. It doesn't say that, and if it doesn't say it, it means something else. So it behooves us to understand what it means. That's what he comes to address in chapter 5 in Tanya. And the Alter Rebbe said that because Eliyahu is talking about Torah, in particular, even over mitzvahs, as we'll see soon, therefore the language used is tfisa, because only in Torah do you have the ability to grab, in quotations, God, and God grabs you. Because the idea of grabbing is like a hug, and it's a hug on one hand from the outside, but also at the same time when you internalize Torah vis-a-vis the understanding of Torah, which we learned yesterday, Hillel, in the Shir, is not just the mitzvah of Torah. There's two things. There's a mitzvah like all other mitzvahs. There's the mitzvah to put on tefillin, to build a sukkah, whatever, and to korban Pesach. There's a mitzvah called Limud Torah. But that's not what we're talking about in Perek Hey and Tanya. We're talking about the virtue of learning, studying Torah, not the mitzvah of Torah. There is a mitzvah of Torah, of studying. But then there is the actual understanding. And that's something separate and different and unique. And that's what he explains here, that what's its uniqueness? That when you learn Torah, there's no greater wonder union with God vis-a-vis when you study Torah. Why? Because at the very same time that you comprehend something in Torah, the Torah is infinite, so the Torah grabs you, surrounds you. In normal studies of anything else for what in the physical world, since the item is limited, because it's a creation of God, and every creation is limited, so it has an end. You might not know the end, but it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So therefore, it's possible to actually completely, thoroughly, and entirely understand something. And at that point, Avram, when you do so, you have it fully. It doesn't have you. You've inculcated it inside your brain, and now it's yours. You're in control. It can't control you because you've made it part of you. The only thing that we find that's in you and simultaneously outside of you is Torah. Why? Because Torah's bli gvul, is infinite. Because Torah is Hashem's Torah, and just like Hashem and His Torah are all one. So the Torah is infinite. So the same Torah that you understand, the same Torah that you learn when you're in Cheder, and you learn when you're a young boy in yeshiva, and you learn then later as an adult, and then Daf HaYomi, and you learn the same Gemara and the same Mishnayos with more understanding. But it's the same text. Why? Because Torah is bli gvul. A person will not come to the end to the end of understanding within Torah, because there's always more. And this is what he alluded to in chapter Hey. So that's why the word tfisa, grabbing, is appropriate for Torah learning. In yesterday's section that we studied, the Alter Rebbe said that he added a nuance that's very important, and that's on page Yud before the brackets, a few lines before. He says, "Ulishma hainu kedei lekasher nafshe l'Hashem." What does it mean to learn Torah Lishma? For the sake of Torah? It means to connect yourself and bind yourself to God. Not for parnasa, not for health, not for ego, not for anything except for one thing. Hashem says, "You want me? I'm in this Torah," so you say, "I want God," and God tells me He's in the Torah, so I want His Torah. That's the concept of a kasher. His kashrus, binding himself to Hashem, and that's the real meaning of Lishma, right? I learned Torah for the sake of Torah, not for the sake of my self-aggrandizement in any way, shape, or form. Now, in the brackets that follow, which we're going to learn now, the Alter Rebbe addresses two aspects, something called mazain and levushim, food and garments, which we spoke about before, but here he talks about it for the benefit of the soul. Yes, Avram. Oh, I thought you want okay. So here, just a small introduction is proper. B'chlal, we find there's three things: bayis, a house; levush, clothing, garments; and mazon, of food. And these are three basic needs of every human being to live in a home. The Gemara says, "Misha ein loy bayis, eina adam." Someone who's homeless is not a human. It's like you feel like I'm not a human. I'm not wholesome. I don't have where to be. So a bias is an axiom for humanity. That's a basic need. Then they have clothing. Since Adam Arishan and Chava, they committed a sin in Gan Eden, therefore we need clothing. If you walk around without clothing, it's embarrassing and not nice, and you'll be arrested. So you need clothing. That's a basic need. It protects you from the cold, and it helps you in the warmth, etc. And then there is food, which is more basic. Without food, without mazon, you can't survive. So in Kabbalah, these three ideas are used to describe different ways that God manifests the world. One is called the Or Makif, and one's called the Or Pnimi. The encompassing light, the peripheral light, Or Makif. The word Makif, it surrounds, it's the periphery. And the Or Pnimi is the inner light. The general difference is the Or Makif impacts the person, but in a way that's called Makif. So, for example, when a miracle happens, we are impacted. Sure, we're impacted, but it didn't happen to us, particularly in this time and this place. And even if it did, it's not within the confines of convention. It shatters convention. So it's an expression of Hashem's energy, Hashem's or, Hashem's koyach, but in what manner and what style? Makif. It's outside of your experience, okay? That's an important basic explanation to what Or Makif is. Then we have Or Pnimi. Or Pnimi means that it pervades. It's the light that's Pnimi. It pervades the individual and the world from the inside. The Or is measured according to the vessel. You can only pour in so much liquid into a cup, depending if it's an 8, 10, or 12-ounce cup. Why? Because the keli, the vessel, determines how much Or. Why is that? Because the relationship between the energy, or in this case the water, the liquid going into the cup, is bipnimius. It goes into the cup. So if you put into an 8-ounce cup 10, the amount of 10 ounces of water, it's going to spill over because it's outside of the boundaries and it can't handle it. So too we understand that the Hashem's light, Hashem's energy, there's a type of an energy from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that Hashem gives the world that is measured based on the capacity of the world to handle. So for us individually, depending on how much seichel we have and the midos and how refined we are, that's how much this aspect of God's energy is given to us. So this is one nekuda. Then Chassidus explains that in Makif itself, in the Or Makif, there's two aspects. One is called Yonusin Makif Harochoik, a distant Makif, and one's called Makif Hakorev, a closer Makif. What's the difference? The difference is whether within the Makif, within the periphery energy of Hashem, how impactful is the energy, the koyach, on the person, even in a periphery way. And the example used for this in Chassidus is the difference between a house and clothing. In a house, you can wear clothing, not wear clothing, and you can wear clothing that are 10 times as big as you. In other words, the house surrounds you. It's makif. Clothing surround you as well. They're not, but they're on you. They're measured based on your length and breadth and width and height and etc. and weight. So are clothing a makif? Yes.